I'm Nick Ravelis, the Geisel Director of Education and Outreach for San Diego Opera. You're preparing to come to our wonderful production of Samuel Barber's Vanessa. This is a really fascinating opera, and I'd like to spend a few moments sharing some things about it with you. The composer Samuel Barber was born in West Chester, Pennsylvania in 1910, and he seemed destined from childhood to live a life in music. After all, his aunt was the great Metropolitan Opera contralto Louise Homer, and she herself was married to a composer. It must have been especially inspiring for a young budding composer to have such an illustrious opera singer in the family. It's interesting to note that Barber was also a pretty fine singer himself, and he was somewhat torn in his teenage years between a career as a composer and a career as a singer. While a young student at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, Barber met another young composer, Giancarlo Menotti. Born in the Italian town of Cadigliano in 1911, Menotti came to this country in 1928 to study composition at Curtis, and the two young men began a close relationship that was to continue through the rest of their lives. But whereas Menotti had success as an opera composer early in his career, with a Metropolitan Opera debut of his first opera, Amelia Goes to the Ball, in 1938, Barber was finding his compositional voice by writing songs, chamber music, and symphonic works. Barber's musical language was totally connected to his desire to connect emotionally with his audience. Although his music could be dissonant, it was always lyrical and expressive. Because of his accessibility to a listening audience, Rudolph Bing, the director of the Metropolitan Opera in New York, offered Barber a commission for an opera, convinced that his inherent lyricism would lend itself well to the theater. In searching for a man to write the text for the opera, his librettist, Barber turned to a number of contemporary authors, people like Thornton Wilder, Dylan Thomas, Stephen Spender, and James Agee. But eventually, in a rather bold move, Barber turned to his close friend Menotti to write the text for the opera. Menotti had written the librettos for most of his own operas, and even though he had a reputation of leaving things till the last minute, Barber still felt that the best poet for this work would be someone who understood opera from both sides of the fence, as both a poet and as a composer. More as inspiration for the libretto than as a true source, the two young composers turned to Isaac Dinneson's 7 Gothic Tales for the opera's setting in an unnamed northern country during Victorian times, and for the haunting atmosphere that pervades the work. Both Rudolph Bing and the composer Samuel Barber wanted Vanessa to be a vehicle for the great Greek-American soprano Maria Callas. They felt that given Callas's personality, which was fiery and melancholy at the same time, she'd be a perfect fit for this tragic woman who has been tortured by the memory of a past love. But Callas, shrewdly realizing that the character of Erica, Vanessa's niece, would be a star turn for whoever took that role, declined the part. Now that's the sensitivity of a true diva. Another singer was contracted to actually sing the role, but canceled at the last minute, and the Met management turned to the American soprano Eleanor Stieber 6 weeks before opening night. Although the role was extremely difficult to learn, Stieber did learn it, and eventually she made it her own. The young mezzo, Rosalind Elias, was cast in the role of Erica, and she proved Maria Callas to be correct. Elias nearly walked off with the opera, so convincing was she in portraying Vanessa's niece. Filling out the cast were tenor Nikolai Geda as the lover Anatole, mezzo Regina Resnick as Vanessa's mother, the Baroness, and bass Giorgio Tozzi as the old doctor. This star-studded cast was all under the baton of Dmitri Mitropoulos. Now, these are all just names to us today, but in the 50s, these were singers and a conductor that were absolutely at the top of their field. A composer could not have asked for a better cast for his first opera. The premiere performance on January 15, 1958 was a spectacular success, with the audience and with many of the critics as well. New York Times critic Howard Taubman said that the finale is a full-blown set piece that packs an emotional charge that would be a credit to any composer anywhere today. Concerning Menotti's text, Harriet Johnson of the New York Post wrote, "This is possibly his finest libretto, a more mature piece of writing than those he has provided for his own operas. May the two foster artistically, together and singly, in the future. Their gifts in our time are rare indeed." It's a shame that the composer Menotti never received the same kind of success at the Met with his own operas, which were destined to achieve greater admiration on television and in regional companies throughout the world. But given the success of Vanessa, it wasn't long before the Met came back to Barber with a commission for a grand opera to open their new opera house at Lincoln Center in 1966. Antony and Cleopatra opened on September 16th that year to more fanfare than any other opera had in the history of the Met. Despite an all-star cast, the opera was one of the great disappointments in the company's history of commissions for new opera. Admittedly, the production crew tried to do way too much in order to show off what the new stage could do, and the Zeffirelli production and libretto were deemed too grandiose, too big for Barber's more sensitive musical personality. But the composer revised the score in 1974, a revision which was eventually to be seen at the Juilliard School of Music in New York, the Spoleto Festival, and Chicago Lyric Opera. And it remains to be seen if this more successful version will one day hold its own. The disappointing reception of Antony and Cleopatra was a real blow to Barber's compositional process, and he never recovered. Although he wrote a handful of works after 1966, he was never to regain the stature he enjoyed during the height of his success with Vanessa. When he died of cancer in 1981 at the age of 70, his librettist and companion, Menotti, was at his bedside. Menotti, as the time of this broadcast, remains active in the opera world as a stage director and recently celebrated his 93rd birthday. The opera is set in a lavish home in a northern European country around the year 1905. Vanessa, her mother the Baroness, and her niece Erica are expecting Vanessa's former lover, Anatole, whom she hasn't seen in 20 years. The disappointment of that love caused her to close up the house, cover all the pictures in the mirrors, and become a recluse. A fierce snowstorm, Vanessa suspects, has delayed Anatole's arrival, and the tension mounts. The Baroness sits silently as Erica tries to entertain Vanessa by reading out loud. A tower bell announces the arrival of a carriage, and a young man stands in the darkness of the doorway. Not looking at him, Vanessa recounts her feelings of love, then turns to find it isn't the man that she expected. She screams and runs from the room. Erica enters and in conversation comes to understand that this is not Anatole, the lover of previous years, but Anatole, the son of that lover by another woman. Erica sees him as a charming, handsome stranger, and they sit down to the table that was set for Vanessa and her Anatole. The second scene occurs a month later. Vanessa and the young Anatole have become fast friends, and they're outside ice skating while Erica and the Baroness talk about what happened that first fateful night that she met the handsome stranger. Erica allowed him to seduce her. He has said he wants to marry her, but Erica expects love, not marriage out of duty. Vanessa and Anatole enter, along with the family doctor. Vanessa proceeds to tell them all that she plans to have a gala ball during which all of the mirrors which have been covered with cloth for so many years will finally be uncovered, and a new spirit will inspire her house. The men leave, and Vanessa reveals to Erica the love that has grown between herself and the young Anatole. Erica is shocked, of course, and looks for Anatole to give him the opportunity to explain himself. He tells her that he isn't capable of promising love, only his hand in friendship and affection. As everyone else departs for church, she determines that Vanessa will have her lover, and she will not be an obstacle to her aunt's happiness. A gala New Year's ball ensues, the old doctor arriving and drunkenly muttering that he has an important announcement to make. Erica and the Baroness don't come down for the party, much to Vanessa's annoyance, but she is buoyed by Anatole's love for her. Just as Erica appears at the top of the stairs, the doctor announces the engagement of Vanessa and Anatole. Erica faints, but when she revives, she mumbles, his child, it must not be born." And then suddenly she runs out into the cold winter night. In the final act, we find Vanessa in Erica's bedroom, trying to imagine why Erica would do something so desperate. She's brought into the room unconscious, the doctor assuring Vanessa that her niece will recover. Vanessa then asks Anatole whether Erica's attempt at suicide was because of him, and he denies it, saying that Erica does not love him. Erica asks to be alone with her grandmother, the Baroness, and in their conversation, Erica tells her that Anatole's child will not be born. The old woman turns from her and leaves the room silently. The last scene finds Vanessa and Anatole as newlyweds, preparing to leave for Paris to begin their lives together. Vanessa and Erica talk, the aunt revealing that she's leaving everything, all her estate, to her young niece. But she still wants to know why Erica attempted suicide. Erica can only answer that it was not because of Anatole, but just a foolish act that marked the end of her youth. She refuses, even now, to destroy Vanessa's illusion of happiness. As the new couple leave the house, with the Baroness sitting silently, Erica orders the staff to recover the mirrors, to again drape the pictures and lock the gates. It is now Erica's turn to wait. How do composers describe the characters in their operas through music? Now, this is an important question because character development can't just be left to the words or to the text of an opera. It must come from the music. I mean, that's what opera is all about. Let's take Vanessa as an example. Vanessa is a complicated person. At one point we see her as passionate, at another she's hysterical, and much of the time she's haunted by memory and hoping to relive a past that will never repeat itself. Think of your own life. Do you remember someone close to you who, for one reason or another, you don't see anymore? Maybe even someone you loved who has been taken away from you. You can see that person in your memory, but you'll never be able to relive the wonderful moments you had together. Well, that's how Vanessa feels, especially at the beginning of this opera. So the composer Samuel Barber had to figure out a way to express this. Now, her more active, manic side is expressed in that introduction from the orchestra, which, although it's dissonant, has a couple of lyrical tunes later on that will be used in the story. But let me play this opening for you one more time. After the curtain opens, Barber gives us an indication of the atmosphere in this house, where Vanessa has virtually locked herself up, where her mother, the Baroness, no longer speaks to her, and where the young and beautiful Erica, her niece, is trapped with these two older women, each of whom expresses their bitterness in different but poisonous ways. This moment is even marked in the score dark, and unquiet, so that there's no question about what is being described. The musicologist John W. Freeman tells us of this particular moment that it sounds like a stalking figure, like someone pacing a room. But Vanessa has her lyrical moments as well. In Act 1, Scene 2, after she goes ice skating with the young Anatole, she describes to Erica the conversation she's had with him and recounts, to Erica's horror, the growing love between them. In the orchestra, we hear one of those long lyrical lines for which Barber is so well known and which expresses Vanessa's interior longing. Other characters have expressive music as well. Anatole, although he's something of a cad, has some lovely music as he lets Erica down easily in the second scene, telling her that he can only love her as a friend. Another interesting theme of Anatole's occurs when he warns Vanessa in Act 2 that love has a bitter core. This tune repeats again towards the end of the opera, after Erica attempts suicide, when Vanessa turns to Anatole and asks if he knows anything about it, if in some way Erica's desperate act is related to him. But one of the most powerful moments in the score is when Erica informs her grandmother that as a result of her rushing out of the party into the snow, she's lost the baby, Anatole's child that she was carrying. At the moment she informs the Baroness of this, the old woman rises out of her chair with a thump of her cane, turns her back on Erica, and walks out of the room, to remain silent now to a second generation of women in this family, disgusted as she is by the denial of reality and the lack of courage which she finds in everyone around her. The music which accompanies this moment in the orchestra is a deformed version of Anatole's theme that we heard a little earlier. The music of Vanessa is certainly powerful and expresses all of the subtle and not so subtle emotions that come to play in this sad but memorable household. Like all the truly great opera composers, Barber expresses it all perfectly through beautiful lyrical music for his sad, flawed characters.